He
Oh
is the
boy,
founder of iCodeWith.ai.
that's a lot of pressure.
And without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Marcelo.
Thank you so much. You might want to adjust the volume because I tend to project really well. I don't think I need the microphone, but just in case, sorry if I'm too loud, especially as I get into the presentation, get a little bit more excited. So welcome everybody. Thank you for inviting me here. I appreciate it. Obviously, we're going to be talking about vibe coding. How many of you are already vibe coding? Cool. How many of you have no clue what vibe coding is about? How many of you are just here for coffee? Okay, cool. So we're going to talk about vibe coding and why vibe coding doesn't really work properly. And just a little bit of a hint, it's a human issue, not a vibe coding issue, not an AI issue. And you'll learn why in just a minute. But so we're going to be talking about bringing some structure into vibe coding without losing the creative vibes. But you're going to need some structure to be able to guide and create something that's scalable and maintainable. And there's a new word or term that came out maybe about 3 months ago, spec-driven development, that was pushed by Amazon, and it's picked up pretty much by everybody. And it's what we've been doing now for months, but it's formulating into the spec-driven development. And you'll know all about that in just a minute. Real quick show of hands, how many of you are developers? Okay, engineers, all right. And the rest of you are more business, product, marketing. Yeah, so non-developers, very cool. You are the new generation of builders, not replacing developers. Developers, don't worry, you won't be replaced. And actually, if you're a developer and use AI, you're just gonna be a better developer. That's all it is, because you're gonna be able to deliver quicker. But there's a new generation of builders that will be solidified in the next year or so, are vibe coders. And vibe coders are gonna be everybody except developers that are working in product and marketing in any of these departments. And they want to create tools, they want to create things that they weren't able to create before because engineers are very busy working on the core product. So it's very hard to get things done. So now you have the power to do this, but you want to start bringing in some systems thinking into the process of vibe coding, because otherwise you're going to end up with something that you're going to throw away and it won't be able to be integrated into your company, and it's really not going to scale. So we'll start with that. So, all right, that was way too long of an intro right there. So that's me. There's my info. Please feel free to take a picture of that. Reach out to me any way you want. Discord, email, web, LinkedIn. I do a lot of LinkedIn. Check out my website, the YouTube, GitHub. I have stuff up there, just, wherever you want. Also, if you don't mind, this is a 100% vibe-coded app. If you open it in your browser now, you can actually open it and put in, if you want, put in your name and email, and then I'll send you updates and stuff. But it's 100% vibe-coded, and I got it to the point where I'm actually turning it into a business for meetups to be able to use this app, so people can check into their meetups. But this is 100% vibe coded, and I can even show you the code later. And I have the code up on GitHub. Also, I have a community on Discord, so feel free to scan that if you want to join. And pretty much everything I do is free. I'm a huge believer of sharing information and education. There's nothing to hide, because you can find it all on the internet, as they say, or on AI now, right, on the chat GPTs. All right, so the agenda for today, what is vibe coding and how is it different from AI-assisted engineering? How good at coding should you be to be a good vibe coder? Why vibe coding doesn't always deliver what you want? Why the SDLC, and for you that are developers know what this means, for you that are non-developers will know what this means after you're done here, matters even more now that we're moving so fast. We're gonna have an overview of spec-driven development frameworks, including the one that I created. And then we'll go through some tips and best practices for vibe coding. And if we have time, I'll show you some actual vibe coding. It's gonna depend on the time. Please, I don't wait till the end. Context is very important. So if you have questions, raise your hand. I'll try to call on you. If I'm in the middle, I'll finish the thought, but I'll call on you in the middle. And I say context is important because this is key to AI and to vibe coding. Context engineering and putting the right context at the right time in the process, it's extremely important to be able to deliver what you want out of vibe coding. So that's why I say context is important. So ask questions throughout. And then if we have time, we'll do a vibe coding session. Also, if anybody tells you they're an expert in vibe coding, they're lying. I mean, it's been since February when the term came out, right? I'm just 2 chapters ahead of you. Some of you may be 3 chapters ahead of me. You're just not presenting here. That's all it is. And everything I tell you today, I guarantee you that if I come back in a month, it's all old and outdated. And it's like, why did you say that? Well, I didn't know this was going to happen, right? So just keep that in mind, that nobody is an expert. Don't feel intimidated. Go try it. Go fail. It's a good thing. When you fail, that means you've tried and you learned something, and then you try again. So, okay, so let's start with what is vibe coding and how is it different from AI-assisted engineering? So vibe coding is idea first. It's idea-driven, right? So it's all about exploring your idea, about refining it. It's very improvisational. It starts with your broad idea. I want to create a video game, a shoot-'em-up alien video game. You start with that. Now, the issue that people run into is they type that in the prompt, and then AI does something, and they go, oh my God, this is not what I wanted. Why didn't it know every single detail I have in my brain when I just told it, I want you to create an alien game, right? The idea is refined throughout the interactions with AI, and if you compare this to an airplane, you are the passenger, right? And the pilot is AI. It does everything for you. You're just on for the trip, basically. Now, in AI-assisted engineering, this is very systematic. It's very iterative. Those that are engineers and developers here know this really well. You start with very clear requirements. You optimize for velocity and reliability. And in this case, in the airplane, you're the pilot. And sometimes you'll be the passenger, but most of the time you're the pilot. You know where you're headed. You know all the instrumentation in the airplane, right? But sometimes you go, autopilot, I need to go read a magazine or eat my lunch while we're flying here, so go ahead and fly it. But so if we compare it to music, in vibe coding, you're doing jazz. In AI-assisted engineering, you're doing classical composition. So the idea here is that you continue doing your jazz, but you bring in a little bit of this classical composition to put structure. So you can improvise in between where you're actually headed, right? So you know where you're headed, you have a plan, you have a design, but in between all that, you can do all your creative thinking and improvisation. So that's why it's important to, when people say vibe coding is terrible, it does terrible things. And we've heard news stories. The T app is one of them. I don't know how many of you heard about that. But it was an app that was created using 100% vibe coding. And they stored private information, IDs. It was an app focused on women, and they had to be verified. And they put it in a public folder that was created by Amazon S3. And then they stole everything, and they had all these IDs. And immediately they blamed AI, when really the problem was the product owner that didn't call a security engineer that said, hey, we're doing this. What do you think? Is this, where are we doing wrong, right? So we want to bring some of that AI-assisted engineering mentality into vibe coding, so then you can deliver something that's scalable and secure and works. So just to keep in mind, in vibe coding, you're basically jamming with AI. Some days you'll make music, some days it's just pure noise, but it's always creative, right? With AI-assisted engineering, you're conducting a performance that needs to land every single time. So try to bring a little bit of that thought process into your vibe coding session. So yes. Yeah, I think, if you're a purist, vibe coding is you just let AI do whatever it wants and you just go with the flow. But the reality is that's just how it started. It's not really what's happening now. And AI-assisted engineering is more focused on engineers, whereas spec-driven development is more focused. It's a new way of coding, but it's also, it's being born out of vibe coding, right? So it's how do we bring the structure? So, the answer is yes and no. I mean, it's a term that people accept and it's a term that people don't accept. But the reality, it doesn't matter. We're basically going to end up with pure coders, or we're going to end up with vibe coders, or whatever they're going to be called in the future. and they're going to be using spec-driven development, basically. And the pure vibe coding, the person that puts in the prompt, and let's say I do whatever they want, they're going to be hobbyist, because you're not going to be able to deliver, you're not going to deliver that app. Yeah, no problem. Hopefully that answers. So how good should you be at coding when you're vibe coding? So this really depends, and then you got to ask yourself some real questions, right? What's the user base of this app? Is this for you, or is it for 1 million people? Because that changes the whole game. What are the potential risks in the T app? Well, the potential risk is that women are uploading their private IDs, and now if that gets out there, now people have the IDs, the photo IDs of all these women, and that happens, so the risk is very high. So what's the impact of that? Well, what happens if somebody breaks in and steals all their the IDs? Well, the impact is huge. So what does that mean? Well, it means that maybe you can start with vibe coding, but you got to bring a human in the loop, because as all of these go up, your user base goes up, your risk goes up, the impact of those risks go up. Even if you're working with a developer, a human developer, not AI, but a human developer, you still can't just trust that developer, right? You've got to bring in other people to verify the security, to verify that the framework is implemented properly. Yeah.
Can you prompt it and says, you know what, make it SOC and GDPR compliant, and it will go through it, and you would prompt it and says, you know what, if I'm using a table or database, use RSL. I mean, right. So you can you come up with some prompt that you constantly tell it because it forgets
Correct.
all the time?
You can.
And
yeah, you can. But here's the problem. You may not know what it does. It may
that's
say,
correct.
I did,
That's the catch.
but you may look at it and go like, I don't know. But that happens also with the developer that says, I'm giving you this compliant. You as a programmer will look at that and go like, I have no clue if he or she did or not. So then you bring in an expert in security, again, based on the impact size. If it's a video game you're doing for yourself or even for tons of people, but there are no, the impact is that the game crashes and people can't play, oh well, nobody dies, right? So I always recommend that it's not just about the AI helping you, but also there are times when you're going to have to bring a human in the loop. Yeah. Visibility and exposure, right? The exposure and visibility for that app, for the T app, was huge. Business disruption, right? Lawsuits, legal issues, financial and reputation consequences, right? Who's going to trust this person that created the T app anymore now to create any product? So how good at coding should you be to vibe code? Look at this list and you figure it out, you know, and figure out what the impact of this list is on you, on your finances, on your legal reputation. Yeah. All right, so vibe coding invites creativity, but responsibility keeps it in tune. The bigger the stakes, the more necessary your human touch becomes, human in the loop. Very important. Okay, so why does vibe coding doesn't always deliver what you want? Well, you start with a lack of clear goals. You probably don't even know what you want. You have a general idea, but you probably don't have it all refined exactly with every piece of detail. I don't know how many of you worked on apps, any kind of app before, but it requires so many details beyond just the idea of, I want to do tasks. And you need to really understand those. AI makes assumptions when intent is vague. So when you don't know what you want, AI will start making assumptions, and it may not be what you want. It may be what you want, or it may give you new ideas. That's a beautiful thing about AI too, right? Is that sometimes you do want that because it actually will create ideas that you didn't even think about. And that's fine. That's part of the discovery process. You're going to see when we talk about the frameworks, but that's part of the discovery process, the idea refinement. You want to allow, that's why it's not all about AI assisted engineering where it's pure structure, because you want that discovery process. You want that non-deterministic aspect of AI that gives you ideas that you didn't think about. Code may work, but lacks cohesion or structure, and this is for scalability, right? For integrating, you may be writing an app in marketing that you start using internally at your company, but then it grows to a point where they go, oh, we need to now integrate it into another system because we're pulling data from Salesforce into this app now. Great. Well, have you thought about that when you first started doing this app? And if you haven't, do you have a plan of how you're going to be able to do that? That requires a little more systems thinking. It's hard to reproduce or scale what you built. Returning to the project, and this happens without frameworks, this happens all the time. You do the project, you quit, you come back the next day, you open it up, and you're like, you and AI have no clue what you did, where you left off, and what the next thing is to do. With the framework I created, I solved that problem, but there are other frameworks out there that is actually solve that problem as well. And then, of course, momentum solves when context gets lost. And context is extremely important. When AI loses context, when you lose track, you go, forget it. AI vibe coding is terrible. This is not going to work. Let's just, hire a developer. Let me make sure I got everything. Yes.
Will you go through so we know how to keep the context within the discussion, the chats? I mean, because you have to constantly remind it. Seems like after 3 or 4 chats that, you know what, this is what we did, don't lose context. Or is there something you can put in the development that says, you know what, these are the criterias that you need to do every time you're trying to, when I give you a prompt to make sure that you follow these 4 or 5 steps, will you go and give us some guidance on that?
Completely. And that's where these frameworks come into play, because they're basically agentic frameworks that put down, basically where we're coding in the future is through English. And we're coding where we're actually guiding the AI through tool usage, through prompt templates. That's called context engineering, where you're actually literally writing in English, writing instructions to the AI to follow. And I'll show you my framework, but almost all frameworks are basically, you can literally open them up and read, and they're markdown files, basically. Yeah, so you could definitely do that, yeah. Okay, and for those of you, how many know what the context window of AI is? Okay, so we all have our brain and memories, right? Some of us can remember a lot more than others. When you hear context window, is how much can a AI engine remember in the window that you're having the conversation with, right? So sometimes it'll say 1 million token, and sometimes it'll say 200,000 tokens. That means that it could hold that amount of information and remember that. And then when it goes over that, it starts forgetting the older stuff as it fills up, kind of like us, right? We have the same kind of like that limited, well, my age, very limited now, but that limited context window, and we only remember certain things. The problem with when you hear 1 million token window, you go, wow, we can put in like, an entire library in there, it'll remember. The problem is it gets lost. When you give it too much information, AI, it gets completely lost. And to answer kind of also, again, part of that question was, the best thing to do, and you'll see, is to break things into chunks. And when you're vibe coding, you don't say, go build the entire app. You break it into what I call versions. You can call them phases, cycles, whatever, chunks you can call them. But you break it into pieces, and then you only focus AI. We're only working on this piece right now. Nothing else. Don't give it, if you have an idea in the middle of that piece, you put it aside, you put it into a backlog, and then you continue on that piece. Then when you're done, you move on to the next piece. When you start giving it, just like a human, right? It's like if you tell a coder, go do this, and then you come back and give that coder 100 other instructions, they're gonna get lost. Things are not gonna be delivered on time. Same with AI. All right, so AI, this is extremely important, people, very important. AI doesn't know what you meant. It only knows what you said. So don't get mad at AI because you typed in something, but in here you meant something else, because it can't read your mind. Maybe in the future. So really, really important. And to be honest with you, I could say that. I could say my spouse doesn't know what I meant. She only knows what I said, right? So, I mean, you could replace that with humans too. All right, so I need one volunteer real quick. Anybody? All right, right here. So I'm telling you to please paint my house and tell me what you did. So tell me just real quick, what did you do? I just told you to paint my house.
I painted your house.
Okay. What color?
White.
Okay. Did you paint the inside?
No.
Oh, man. Did you paint the second story? 'Cause did you know it was a two-story house?
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay, so you assumed, yeah, you kind of, because I didn't tell you, right?
Yeah.
But you painted the outside walls? I didn't
Yes.
want that.
Oh,
No. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I just don't want them in my house, right? That's just an example with humans how communication breaks down. What I should have said is, please paint my two-story house with a navy blue exterior. You painted it white. I didn't want it white. I wanted navy blue, so. And a white trim, and use light gray for all interior walls. I like it done within a week, and my budget is $5,000. Do you see the big difference? And that's just in one prompt, right? But in context engineering, you build upon this. So think about that, going from this to I want a video game where I shoot aliens, to I want a video game that has these kinds of aliens, that when you shoot the aliens, they do this, and these are the point, you go on and on and on, right? Yes.
To make that process more streamlined, is it possible to say, okay, not ChatGPT or whatever program you're using, and say, hey, I'm going to ask you to paint my house. Ask me questions that help me refine what I'm looking for, so that when I give you the prompt, you know exactly what I'm searching for.
Exactly. That's
Yeah?
excellent. Yes. And
Okay.
these frameworks actually start with that. You start with a general thing, and they start asking you questions. So if you don't use a framework, what you do is you say, hey, I want to do this video game. Challenge, okay, the keywords to use is important. Tell AI, this is important, so it follows that. Tell AI, challenge me, because otherwise AI is a yes person or a yes machine, whatever it is. So tell it, challenge me. So you literally say, challenge me. Then you say, ask me questions. Then you say, give me options. What else did I miss? So you literally want to have a conversation, just like you would with a human, right? Like if I'm literally going to hire somebody to paint my house, I'm going to start asking questions of the painter, and get more details about it. But yes, definitely have it ask you a lot of questions. Yeah. Okay, so the SDLC is a software development lifecycle. How many of you are familiar with that? Okay, perfect. So this matters a lot because it brings a structured way of turning ideas into software. Engineers have been using this 40 plus years, even longer probably. But it's extremely important because it puts you through a process that gets you from that idea all the way to delivering. Now, this doesn't mean that it's about paperwork. It's more about the flow. It's about the guidance and going through that process to be able to deliver that application. And you start with planning, then you build, then you test, then you release, and you iterate on this. Now, you can do this 100 times for an app. And in fact, you do that. You do it 1,000 times for an app. In professional environments, they're called sprints. They put them into sprints, and in sprints, you have deliverables, releases that people release. And that's the best way to do it, because you don't have a huge app, let's say like Facebook or any social media app that you use, whatever it may be, and it just appears, right? There are incremental features that you keep adding and you keep improving. So the software development lifecycle, even for Vive coders, which are not engineers, it's important to, at a minimum, understand it. Okay? And everything I tell you here today, I don't want you walking out and going like, oh my God, I have to be a developer to Vive code. You don't, but you have to be informed. You have to understand at a high level. I started my career as a developer 30 plus years ago. I've moved away from development as I migrated in my career, right? And Vive coding has brought me back. So I have the mentality of a developer for the systems thinking, but I can't write code from scratch anymore. Now, but what I do is I have lots of apps that I wrote with lots of frameworks that I've never heard of that I've learned by using AI at a high level. Can I go into the code and actually fix issues? No, I can't. But at a high level, I understand how these frameworks work and interact with each other. So you as a Vive coder are gonna need to understand some of this stuff at a high level. Just saying, oh, I don't need to know any of this and do a prompt is not gonna get you what you want, ever, guaranteed. Okay. So think of the SDLC as a map. Without a map, you risk going fast in the wrong direction and not being able to find your way back when you get lost. The SDLC is your map that will get you from where you wanna go to that point, or from where you're at to where you wanna go. Okay, so spec-driven development, you begin with requirements. What is it that you want to build? You start out with what's your idea? What's the raw idea? What are some of the requirements around that idea? Let me get my notes here to make sure I cover everything. Then you add design notes. So you go from idea to more of a PRD, which is a product requirements document that talks about the what and the why of your product. Why are you doing this? What is it about? From there, you go into a plan document, which is the how. So you start with the raw idea, you figure out, why am I doing this? What is it actually? And then you go into, well, how am I going to do this now, right? And then you start by creating, you break that idea, that product, that plan into actual chunks that you're going to build. Almost every app, you're going to have sort of the foundation layer of the app. Most apps is going to include some database. It's going to include some API interaction, something that it requires an external service, something that you want to use. It's an app that you want to pull the latest weather and start tracking it on your database and do some graphing or whatever. Well, you're going to need an API to go get the latest weather. You're going to need a database to store all this information. You're going to need some sort of function that will analyze this information, right? So you start breaking it like that. And those are the details of just saying, oh, I want an app that tracks weather and analyzes it, right? And then that spec is the shared blueprint. And it aligns the human and the AI. It informs you, because as you go through this process, you actually will learn what it is you actually want to do. Because at the beginning of the raw idea, like most of us, right, we don't know exactly. We just have this little bit of idea and like, okay, but how do we bring this now to fruition? With this documentation, which by the way, AI is creating, so it's not you writing all this stuff. You start with the idea. AI helps you create all of this. Now, it creates it, then you go back and you verify it. You make sure it's okay, you adjust it, you change it. You tell AI you changed it. You ask AI, hey, my changes are implemented, what do you think? And you have this conversation. But at the end, you'll end up with this documentation that it's not like traditional today with coding where you code, you create documentation that nobody ever uses, and it's never updated, and it's 10 versions behind of the real version that's out in the public. In spec-driven development, the documentation is the place that is used to transform to code. So code is sort of a second thing to documentation. Documentation is where everything starts, and when you add a feature, you add it to documentation, and then it transforms that into code. Very different paradigm than it is today with development, which is you code, you document, you ignore, you code, and you keep adding, and maybe you go document. This aligns everybody, and not only it aligns developers, but it aligns engineering department with product, with marketing, with customer solutions, with customer support, because now you have a documentation that is the actual source of truth for everything. And it's actually working in place now. This isn't like, oh, we hope we get there. This is how AI works today. So it guides creativity toward shippable results. So the spec is the primary single source of truth, which is used to transform the idea into code. And that is and that's why you're gonna see a lot of developers also going like, what are you talking about? What do you mean we start with the documentation and that is used to transform code? It's a paradigm shift of what's happening. And I think a lot of engineering departments are gonna take that up. Definitely Vibe coders, because we don't start with code, right? We start with the idea, are definitely using that. So any questions on any of this so far? No? Okay. All right, so let me just take this real quick. So spec-driven development bridges the gap between creativity and structure. It creates shared source of truth, kind of re-emphasizing, reduces rework and surprises, because it's there. Everybody agrees to that document before it's transformed into code. And when you update the document, literally I can then update the code based on those. So you're always working off of that document and you agree on that document. Nobody's going to look at the code and see, except the developers, to make sure it's coded properly. Nobody's going to look at the code and go, oh, we need to change this to add this feature. You work on the feature. It improves collaboration. I think it's going to improve collaboration and communication within departments. Even today, in 2025, there's huge silos in companies within departments. Everybody does their own thing. Everybody has their own agenda. With spec-driven development, I think the silos are going to be broken. Communication will be flowing much easier and across all departments than it does today. At least I hope so. All right. It makes AI outputs more predictable, okay? That's really important as well because we know AI is non-deterministic, so it could sometimes do its own thing. So spec-driven development guides it into a more deterministic, not a full deterministic, but more deterministic point of where you're trying to go. And then the most important part, it makes it scalable and maintainable. Because the number one problem with apps is not just creating them, is scaling them to 1 million users. Is then having the developers or AI continue to maintain them, to refactor code, to make it better, right? Performant better. So, okay. Any questions on spec-driven development? No? Okay. So some frameworks. I created the Cody framework. It's available on GitHub. You can go to my site, click on build. It's free. You can download it and you'll see. There are others, Kiro, which is, it's more of a development environment that has built-in spec-driven development inside of it. It's done by Amazon. I believe you cannot get it yet or now because they got overloaded by users, scalability issues. And they shut it down until they're fixing, which you figured Amazon wouldn't know this part. But then SpecKit was just announced and released maybe 2 weeks ago by GitHub. So it's another spec-driven. And then there's BMAD method by BMAD Code. He's actually going to be on my podcast, the creator of that. So all of these have their own way of doing things. Some are, like BMAD is very robust, has a lot of things, including agents. SpecKit is great, but I believe it's a bit more focused on developers. Kiro and my framework, I think we're both basically more focused on vibe coders. Not that developers can't use it, but it's more focused on the vibe coders and the non-developers. All right. So I'll show you Cody. We'll jump in real quick, but before we do that, I'll show you some best practices, and then we'll jump in and answer any other questions. But it's a lightweight spec-driven development framework for vibe coders. There's a plan phase. This is where you come up with the idea, you refine the idea, you create a PRD, a product requirements document, which is the why. You create a plan, which is the how, and then you jump into what I call the work phase or the build phase, which is where you create a feature backlog. And from the feature backlog, you start creating versions. It breaks it up into multiple versions that you create, iterate, and release. And that's how you build your app to an actual full working app. And then there's a library where you store ad hoc technical documents. As you're building it, you want to track, oh, well, my app allows you to create new content. Well, how do you create new content? Well, here's the methodology. So you add that to your documentation. You have rules, prompts, assets, and a lot more. Like I said, you can get it at my site. Okay, so before we jump into and I don't know if we have time, but hopefully we do. I just want to share some tips and best practices for vibe coding so we can deliver, I would say 90% of what you want. Okay, cool. So this is extremely important. Think like a systems architect. Be able to think abstractly. Think about how do you connect all the points, and don't just think, I just want a video game or I just want an app that lets me add tasks, manage tasks. But really think about what does it take to create that app? What are all the points, the connections that you need to understand? Am I storing data? Do I want the data to be updated live immediately, or is it okay to updated on demand by a button that people you press, or maybe scheduled. The point is you want to think like a systems architect, because now then you'll start bringing a little bit more structure into the chaotic practice of vibe coding, right? You want to have that mixture, that little bit of that full creativity with a little bit of that structure. And the best way to do that is to start thinking like an architect. For example, if you're building, even if you're adding a room to your house, you're not going to go ahead and just start putting wood up and banging against the wall and figure out as you go along. You're going to put a plan together. What walls do we need to bring down? How much are we extending this wall? Do we need a door in here? You know, are there issues for like handicap issues that we need to make sure this door is wide enough? All these things, right? That's like systems architecting. That's systems thinking. You want to think of the big picture before you even go in and add that room or build a house. Define your project vision clearly, and you do this through iterating with AI. You mentioned it. Ask AI to ask you questions. Iterate with AI. Have a conversation with AI, just like you would with a human. I can guarantee you, the more vibe coding you do and the more you iterate, that better communicator you'll become even with humans. Because you'll start understanding that, oh, what I just told this person is really not enough information. They're going to assume certain things that I don't want them to assume, right? So the other thing is stick to a mainstream well-documenting tech stack. So if you are going to pick a tech stack, AI has been trained, right? And there's a cutoff date for training. And the more mainstream technology stacks out there for the front end, for the back end, are very, very well documented. Now, there are something called MCP servers, which is for a completely different presentation that you can add to AI that lets it go and get the latest documentation on any tech stack. It's called context number 7. You can look that up. But usually try to stick with a mainstream, well-documented tech stack, and then you, as a human, learn the high level. Like if AI says, we're going to use Next.js, you don't need to know about routing and all the stuff. Well, actually, I would recommend you do. But learn the high level. You don't need to know how to implement it, but learn the high level, because then you can double check on AI, right? All right, break the work into manageable steps. Even if you're not using an AI agent, you're just using ChatGPT, when you're going through it with ChatGPT or with Cloud Desktop, tell it, hey, break this into chunks that we can implement one at a time, and let me test these chunks as we implement them, right? That's going to get you, I would say 90% of, maybe almost 100% of what you want if you break it into chunks. The more you tell it, do the whole thing and don't involve me, the less you're going to get exactly what you want. Again, and we did the painting the house, right? But provide, I'll answer you in a minute. Provide AI with context and examples. So not just, I want you to do all of this in these steps, or I want you to make sure you take care of this, or ask me questions, but here are some examples of what I mean, you tell AI. Because then it will understand. If you're looking for some particular output, give it the example, what does that output look like? I want you to output data in this way, and you show it how, and you tell it it's an example. The more examples you give it, the more it'll understand exactly what you want, and surprise, surprise, when you run it with real data, it'll give you that exact output that you wanted. So, yes.
I love the break the work into small manageable steps. My first project I did, it was like just clicking the button to go through all 7 sprints and it totally failed and I had to restart, right? So I now do that. I think one of the challenges though is that sometimes when you do that, for example, because it's just looking myopically at one thing, it's not incorporating architecture that comes downstream. So my example would be, I'm building a multi-sided platform with 2 different roles and I want different profile contexts for each of them, but I made one profiles table for both of those roles. And my user stories and other things downstream might mean, oh, maybe they should be 2 different tables because there's just different attributes in each of them. But the AI didn't know that, and I kept running into these bug circles because it was just spoon feeding it a little bit at a time. I think in all of this, you have a tip for how would I avoid that kind of headache, because it was a 2 a.m. situation. I'm just like,
Well, don't be
why
coding
can't
at 2
it
a.m.
work?
That's number one tip.
No, I
Go
know,
to
but
sleep.
just like I was,
Go sleep there.
in flow.
Yeah,
Sometimes
no,
you're
I
in
know.
flow. I rest,
I've
I
done
get my
that.
cycles,
I'm
but
kidding.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's where the planning phase comes in, because the planning phase is the big picture. It's where you have the entire big picture. The chunks is taking that big picture and break it into chunks. Now, of course, as you break it into chunks and you work on things, you're gonna maybe have to adjust the road, right, a little bit. But the reality is, you're gonna need to know that, oh, you know what? There is a relationship to this other thing that we're working here on. So you're gonna have to tell AI that. You're gonna have to literally give it the context that says, we're implementing this, but this is gonna affect this other thing over there. So can you please go check that and adjust the plan accordingly? So that's why you as the architect, because at the end of the day, you're the architect and AI is the developer, the helper, right? So you as the architect need to understand these moving pieces. And yeah, if you're a vibe coder starting out, the first one, you're not gonna know this, but the more you do, you will learn this, right? But it's about you understanding all these pieces and how they work together to be able to make those connections for AI. Because in general, AI, I'll get to you in a second, AI may or may not know these connections. So it's the architect mindset. Yeah, it's the architect mindset, and it's you, the human, that is the architect. AI is not the architect. You had a question back there? Hopefully that answered your question.
On that same note, I'm curious if you can talk about if some of the frameworks and or the process, because I've gotten into some situations with vibe coding where I've gotten very far. I've gotten a working prototype that I liked, and then I started iterating from there, and I was unable to revert to earlier versions. So I was trying to use, asking AI to just use Git control versions, but unfortunately, I had to kind of scrap the whole project because it got too far down a road and I wasn't able to revert back.
Right, that's a good point, and I think that's one of my best practices. Let me see. No, we'll get to it. But use Git from the beginning, not Git when you're way deep into it. You don't start a project without initiating Git, and Git is a version control, for those of you that are not familiar. You can have AI do it. I don't recommend letting AI push stuff to Git. The main reason I recommend that is because another story with Replit where AI deleted the database, it was the person's fault for allowing AI to touch production database without having a backup and not having development, right? So, but Git is source control, is version control. And every time you implement anything and you're like, okay, this is good, you literally check it into Git immediately, and then you continue from there. Now, there are some of the AI agents will allow you to go back to a certain, but I would not trust that at all because it will get lost sometimes. So always, always, always use some sort of version control, even if it is literally stopping, copying that entire folder into another place, and then continue. Let's say you're not using Git, which I recommend you do, but if you're not using it, copy that folder somewhere else, and then continue. And then when it does what you said it did, you can literally bring this back and have it continue from there. Now, you're gonna have to clear the context because it will get lost. And there are ways of doing that where in my framework, I have a command that says refresh your memory, which I put it through steps of what does it need to go through in my project to refresh its memory of what this project is about and where we left off. Other frameworks handle it like that as well. Another way of not polluting the context window, remember the context window is that brain, the memory that we have, that AI has. And the more information you put into it, that means it's polluting that window, and AI will get lost. There's other tricks now with Cloud Code, Open Code, I think are the only two right now, that you can spawn off sub-agents. And sub-agents will go off on their own and do their thing and just return exactly what the master main agent wants, and gives it the final information, as opposed to polluting it with, oh, there was a bug, so I need to figure out that, I need to fix this bug first before I can give you the right answer. But I highly recommend make backups either manually or Git. Don't implement anything without that.
And a backup would be a copy of the directory folder.
Yeah, of
Okay.
the entire folder. But I would recommend Git.
Do the frameworks you've talked about, do they include version control and Git, or is that, do you have to learn that outside of these frameworks?
Most of them will, like mine, I remind you, now that we're done with this version, I remind you, check it into Git. I don't do it for you because there are certain things you don't want AI to touch, production database, your main branch. Because, I mean, some people do it and it works fine. I'm a little paranoid when it comes to that. So I'm like, it takes me 2 seconds to do it manually, but you can have AI do it for you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Test the output and iterate frequently, right? So as you're coding, test. Don't just trust what it gave you. You want to test and iterate. Okay, there you go. See, it was in my best practice. Use version control or checkpoints to say progress. And I don't have to expand on it since we just did. Reset or rephrase when you get stuck. I've used Grok. I don't know how many of you have used Grok. It goes into a loop sometimes. Literally, it goes into this loop. I'm like, what are you doing? So I literally tell it, stop. We're restarting, and I clear the entire context window. I refresh where we're at, and then start from the beginning. And don't be afraid to do that. Even Claude Code or any of the AI agents now, in the middle of it, if you see, because it'll tell you the thinking process, it'll tell you what it's doing. If you see something it's doing that you go, wait, no, that doesn't make sense, you can hit escape key or whatever the stop key is for your AI agent and just stop it and tell it, no, you're going the wrong way. You don't have to 100% depend on AI. You could tell AI that it's doing something wrong, and then it will correct itself. And one thing I do, this is something that actually, it's interesting that almost no framework does this, except mine, which is at the end of every version that you implement, I do a retrospective. A retrospective, for those of you that are not familiar, is basically a little meeting where developers get together with product owners and go like, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we fix to do things better in the future? You do that with AI because it teaches you what you've done wrong. It teaches the AI what it did wrong. So when you start the new version, the next chunk, the next cycle, whatever you call it, it'll have the document, the retrospective from the previous version, and it won't repeat the error that it made in the previous version. So that's something that you can, my framework will do it automatically, but you can say, hey, we're done with this session. Can you write up a retrospective? Or you don't have to call it that. It'll know what retrospective is because it's pretty standard. But you can call it, can you write up a summary of what went well, what didn't, and write it into a document? So when you start your next iteration, your next upgrade, your next feature, you go, hey, before we start, please read the summary of the last feature we implemented and make sure we follow the good and don't repeat the bad. And it'll have that in context already. And it's very simple, but you don't want to do that 10 versions later. You want to do it at the end of every chunk that you accomplish, because then it builds up. Yes.
Thank you. So a couple of questions. I know Claude allows you to create a project and you have documents within the project that you make references. When you say to do that retrospective and refer to it to go review it, which IDE are you referring to that allows to do that?
Any of them. It's just the AI agent where you just tell the AI. So Claude doesn't create a project. You're talking about the init, where it just creates the Claude MD file and it creates.
No, the Claude actually create you in Claude application.
Oh, are you talking about Claude Code or Claude Desktop?
Cloud Desktop.
Oh, I'm talking about Claude Code. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So does Cloud Code allows you to have a project, let's say ABC, and then you can say, go look at all the project files.
Yes,
give me a retrospective.
everything is tied together, and that's the recommended way of doing it. If you're going to be vibe coding, I wouldn't be vibe coding with Claude Desktop or ChatGPT. And that doesn't mean you can't use it. You can use it to do a lot of the planning. You can use it to do some testing so you don't pollute the main context window of the Claude Code, or Codex, which is another one by OpenAI, or OpenCode, or Gemini CLI. These are all coding agents. Very different than like ChatGPT or Claude.
Will you show us Claude
I'm going to show you.
code?
Yes,
Okay.
I will. Yep.
And the other question that I have is that when it gets to calling APIs for certain things, I've noticed that it just goes crazy. It at least Lovable or Cursor on all of them that I've used, basically not to in the extent, they just go into massive loops and you spend hours trying to make one API work. Does your framework help with trying to alleviate or get around some of that issues?
So I'm not sure exactly what the issue is. I'm not a lovable person. That didn't sound right. But yeah, but I don't use lovable. But thank you. I'm not sure exactly what the issue is, but I would say the issue is lack of clarity of what you're trying to do, and researching a little bit into what API you want to use. The more guidance you give it, the less loop it'll go into.
And what do you do with hallucinations? I mean, because a lot of times they think they've done something. You go a bunch of steps and say, okay, did you do this? He goes, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do it. I apologize. And all you hear is apology.
Yeah.
Apology.
You get that? You are right. Let me correct
right.
that. Yeah. It's the constant.
Didn't do it.
Yeah. So you literally say, do not hallucinate. You literally say, if you don't know if you don't know how to do this, you stop and you ask questions. Ask for clarification. You literally tell it all this. And I'll be honest with you, I've been doing this for, in tech for 30 plus years. I've dealt with a lot of developers and other people that hallucinate. So it's not just an AI thing. It's literally, yeah, sure. Okay, we'll use that term. Yes, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm having the same issue with Replit right now, that I'm stuck on, I think what it's called, hallucination, where it says, I've done all the things, and I've said, do this, do this, do this. I've done all the things, and I play the app back, I refresh the window, whatever, and then it didn't do what it said it'd do. So I want to almost like reprimand it or something.
Do you know what, we don't have to get into the details, but what you could do is tell it, you said you did this, but this is the actual output of it. And you can show screen captures too, right? So for example, if it said, it moved the button, as an example, it moved the button up, but the button is down here, you literally say, no, look, the button is still there. There may be times where you have to clear that entire context window because it's already lost. So there are commands usually in these services that can clear the context window. So it clears the memory, right? Like, forget everything we spoke about, let's start from scratch kind of thing.
Does that clear the whole work that's been done?
Well, it won't clear the work, it'll clear depending on how they do it. For example, Cloud Code, you can do /compact, which will create a summary of the entire session, so it has enough information on what happened here to be able to start again from that point, right? Replit, I'm not sure about, although yesterday I actually tried my Cody framework on Replit, and it actually does work. You can upload it and it'll guide you through the process. Actually, I was very impressed by that. Yeah, you're gonna have to probably figure out what the issue is, where it hallucinated. And when you say hallucinated, it sounds like it didn't, like it thought it did something, but it didn't. So it didn't make up, it just,
Yeah, it's a very specific animation that I'm asking it to do, and it actually is very capable of executing exact animation that I'm asking it to, but it's I'm trying to tweak the animation, and in the tweaking, I don't know if it's like the two animations are running concurrently, or again, I'm not a coder, I'm like a marketer. In my mind, I do think in systems, and I do think, like, I understand technology, but I don't understand it like a developer would. So I'm just playing, and I'm thinking, oh, I should have probably given it like a, the document that you said, which is the requirements, and I didn't start like that. But we got down the road where it's actually doing kind of what I've asked it to do, but the granular stuff, I'm thinking maybe I should go into the code myself, and then I should, figure out where the animations is firing, and then ask ChatGPT to help me fix it, or have Replit debug the whole app, and it's starting doing that, but it's still getting lost.
so two things. One thing is what you said about ChatGPT. I often do that where I put one agent against another agent to check themselves. That's not a bad thing. You could do that without a problem, and it actually is very helpful because you can say, hey, Gemini, check what Claude just did on this document, and you can point both of them to the same repository. So check what it just did and give me feedback, and then you give that feedback to Claude and go, hey, by the way, your cousin said you were wrong, so go do this. Always be nice to AI, though, just in case for the future. You never know. Insurance policy. Is there a question? Yeah. Yeah, so there was another comment you said that I lost track. But yeah, using the two is, the other comment is sometimes you're not gonna get AI to do exactly, especially when you get into the super detailed of like, oh, the animation is bouncing like this, but I want it to bounce like this. It's gonna be really hard to get AI to do that. And there's gonna be a point. The beautiful thing about AI is not that it replaces humans, it just speeds up everything, right? But there's gonna be a point where you're gonna bring a human in the loop. You get, like, it sounds like here, you go, look, let me move on to finish the app, and let's make notes of, I need to refine this, I need to refine this, I need to refine this. App is finished, everything is checked in, then you go with AI and start refining. And you figure out, AI could refine these two things, but not this one. Now bring a human and have the human do it. I mean, at the end of the day, pay a human. I mean, for now, we're gonna be much better than AI, you know? So you're not gonna be able to get away with it. It's the same thing with the image, using AI to generate images. It can do the images, really beautiful images, but when you get into the full detail, you need somebody that knows Photoshop really well to be able to do all that. So, yeah.
So regarding AI and a lot of the spectrum development, is there an emphasis on security as well, like data, app, all of that? Because it sounds like a lot of the issues that we're having is also going to lead to the T app again, or lack of version control or something. So is that like a section, or is there a big emphasis in that in the spec-driven system?
So the spec-driven systems are frameworks that then you can add security to, right? So what's happening now is you have, like Claude allows you to create agents. And for my website, which is 100% vibe coded, I have a team of agents. And they focus on different things. You literally can create agents with markdowns that basically give it personality, gives it expertise, tells it what tools it can and can't use, and then use these teams of agents to do security checks, right? But right now, all of that you basically have to build yourself. But it goes back again, even if AI can do that today, I think it goes back to the original slide where what's the risk of this failing? You know, what's the impact of that risk? How many people are going to be affected by that? And as that goes up, I so recommend getting a human in the loop, you know, because I can guarantee you those T app people are probably in lawsuits right now. And it's, you know, it's real, you know, it's bad. So yeah, I mean, security is an issue, but I say security is an issue with just coding in general, not just any app, because before Vibe coding, Capital One got broken into many times, and they stole millions of pieces of information, right? And that was coded by humans. So yeah, was there another question?
All right, this is going to be our last question, and then Marcelo will be around for questions afterwards.
I could jump. Do you want me to jump into the demo real quick? I don't know how much time we have. Okay, great.
Very quick question, following up on the two questions over there. What is the role of the markdown file in setting up rules or conditions telling, I want you to do test-driven development, I want you to not hallucinate, I want you to, is that part of where you can avoid running into some of those pitfalls?
So the
Okay.
markdown file is your source code for AI, basically. It's that HTML file, that CSS file, that JS file that developers use for coding. The markdown file is becoming quickly the standard for AI to follow instructions. So when you look at Claude, when you look at Codex, any of the AI agents, Claude will create a claude.md file. Codex will create agents.md, which is becoming sort of the standard for all of them. So it's the source code for telling telling AI what to do and how to do it. Yeah. It doesn't always listen to it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. I know. Was there anything else? That was it? Okay. Real quick, test different models. Don't get stuck, especially with AI today. Don't get stuck on like, oh my God, this is horrible. I'll never touch this again. Because tomorrow, what was great will be horrible because what was horrible is not the best. And you've seen all these YouTubers where they go, it's the end of Cloud Code because Warp just came out. And right, okay. Test different tools. Again, don't get stuck. If this tool doesn't work for you today, it may work tomorrow better. Think about naming conventions. Keep the code dry. Very important. Dry for you developers. You know this, but don't repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself means making code where you can update it in one place and it can be used in a million different places. So that way it becomes scalable. If something changes, right, you just change that one piece of code in that one place, and everywhere else that piece of code is being used, it automatically updates, right? So tell AI, when you're coding, keep my code dry. You just literally say that, and AI will know what that means. When you get into AI subagents, use parallel AI subagents, Cloud Code, Open Code, both supported, and it'll speed up the process. You can literally spawn off, you go, let's build this, but spawn off 3 parallel agents or 3 parallel subagents, 1 focus on the back end and 2 focus on the front end, and let them go at it. Now, there are some issues with subagents where they don't communicate within each other today. So you have to build some sort of like communication tunnel between them so they know that if one updates something that the other one needs, they need to communicate. But they're working on that. They as in the people in tech. Yeah, keep task focus. If you have a preferred approach, yeah. Okay, and then I have a lot more best practices. If you want to take a picture of this, I have a blog article. You can just click on, read that. I'll give it there. And, okay. And then finally, this is just my personal take on things. I think we live in an amazing time. For me, it's my 4th tech revolution I'm living through. I started with, when I was a kid, there were no computers, desktop computers. I got into desktop computing, and then came the internet. I got into the internet way at the beginning, then mobile, and now AI. So I think it's amazing that we're going through this. And again, I have that community. Feel free to join it, and that's it. So thank you.